Lemonade, lemonade, lemonade.
In this video, I'm going to give you some insight into the motivations behind quick sketching. I will be showing a few different motivations, a few different techniques, or a few different ideas for how you can approach quick sketch when you go to do gesture drawing, either from photographs or from life. This first quick sketch is going to be studying composition. Now with composition, you can either start with your figure or you can start with your frame, but the idea here is to frame the space, put the figure within it, and then look at the value relationships between all of the objects within the picture. All of the objects or all of the values, dark, middle, light. A typical picture has 3 to 4 base root values in it, which cover everything in the picture space. And then from there we have modification, gradations, and so forth. This particular type of quick sketch, I'm going in, using the model, looking at the space, and then defining a picture with this particular thumbnail or quick sketch. This second quick sketch is something that you've already seen, something that I've already demonstrated, but I'm looking for form. I'm looking for form using cross contour lines wrapping around the surface. And with this particular image, I can go a little bit further than the ones that I did earlier in 30 seconds, and I'm adding a slightly darker value to the edge line of those particular cross contours. And not only will I get form, but I'll also get light and shadow. So this is actually a really good motivation. You don't have to do a likeness. All you have to do is find how the form works and how the light and dark wrap around it. In this quick sketch, I'm going to be doing what's called patterning. I'm going to be looking at the body from a very generic standpoint. So I'm not using construction or abstraction. I'm using more like geometric contour to define the figure. And then on the interior space, rather than looking for the anatomical scaffold, I'm going to be building the scaffold using shadow patterns, and that's what I'm doing here, defining the shadow patterns. So because it is quick sketch, I am working very bold in the outline, and then I'm going to be working very vividly within the graphic patterning. I'm not going to be thinking about gradation. All I'm thinking about is one simple tone. And the only place where there will be gradation is along the edge where the light and the dark meet. And that is to define how round or how square or sharp something is between the two spaces. But this is all about pattern. So you could say that this kind of figure drawing is much like graphic design. I'm looking for dark and light shapes or puzzle pieces that interlock together to create the whole. This next type of quick sketch was inspired by the animation industry, and it's a construction figure with the muscles completely removed from it, so it's just simple shapes that are really easy to maneuver or animate in this case. The limbs are segmented using a circle, and that circle represents the elbow and the wrist. And by having that ball joint in there, it makes it much easier for me to animate a segment of the body by creating arcing lines that come off of each of those ball joints and tracking them as they move in space. Thus, animation quick sketching. So it's keeping the figure down to a simple mechanic or mechanical shape. Although I have to say that mine are probably even more mechanical than an animator would be drawing them. Theirs would be more bendy, squishy, more personality. This is a bit more mechanical looking than how an animator might draw it out. But still, the same concepts apply. I'm looking for very simple points on the body to make it easy for me to construct it in any other position I need to that's very close to this, or to animate it from this pose to the next. This next type of quick sketching is known as abstracting. Abstracting is using bones, tendons, and muscles of the body and linking those visually together, visually from top to bottom and from side to side within the figure's mass. The figure itself is going to be built within this. Think of it as another scaffold, much like figure construction. We're using very simple shapes that are easy to animate easy to move, easy to remove and reposition without having any of the complexities of the finish on top of this or in the way. And as you can see, like with that leg and the foot, I'm tying things together. I'm looking for the way the body connects from front to back and side to side, top to bottom, to make all of the parts of the drawing feel like they belong together in one continuous action, which is how the body works. Anything we do, all parts of the body contribute to that. So this form of drawing is taking advantage of that concept. And it could be anything that gets tied together. However, the abstraction set does have a very limited range of, or a very limited construct of tools that we learn from, but what it teaches us is that there are more than just those out there. Those are just the simple ones that help us build the simple figure. Now when the figure gets into all these different dynamic poses, we then continue looking for that concept through all the difficulties that we see out in front of us, whether they be through the musculature or from one figure to the next within the picture that we're trying to draw. With this type of quick sketching, what I'm looking for is animation. So it's not like I'm trying to build like an animator would. What I'm trying to do is animate the pose so it has the most dynamic possible. In this case, it's a female figure kicking forward, or in this case, forward towards the camera, but over our left shoulder. So I'm using long, simple lines, and I'm tying them together as much as possible. Very similar to abstracting, only in this case, I'm using the musculature when it counts, so that that musculature also helps carry the message across that this figure is moving in a specific direction. With this type of drawing, I'm going to draw bold. I'm going to draw the lines heavier so that I can see their motivation very easily and not get caught up in all the details. Those details are going to slow the pose down and make it less lively looking. This form of quick sketching is known as contour drawing, and in the way that I'm doing this, I'm going from one segment to the next on the body, which means I'm looking for bones and muscles and where they change, and I'm making a very specific statement about that change, which means I'm kind of making a little notch, or I'm changing the line direction deliberately so that you can see the intention there within that little detail. If I don't do that, then the lines tend to look a little bit mushy, and we can't read the figure underneath it or the construction underneath it for what it's actually trying to be. In this type of contour drawing, I tend to go from side to side on the figure, one side, then the other, and I'm looking for the container and the balance of the container so that the shapes don't drift too far apart from each other, because it is really easy for contour drawing to get out of control quickly. Now again, I'm using a controlled line here because I understand the anatomy of the figure, but you can do this with not as much knowledge of the anatomy and you'll still get some beautiful drawings out of it. And in this case, I just go for the simple contour of the figure and I'm not going after too much more, but you can develop the details within as well if you choose to do that. This type of quick sketching is going to be an anatomical search. I'm taking a pose and I'm solving the pose first, so the entire container is built. That way I understand what it is that I'm designing into. Then I'll go to work constructing, and constructing is very much like the word. I'm using straighter lines to measure with. I'm using distances and volumes or spaces to proportion things, so I know exactly how far apart each of the scapulas are from the spine, for example. I know exactly the elevation of the scapulas to the rib cage. And then once those basic shapes are put in, I'll go to work building the organic structure of the muscles sitting on top, like I'm doing here in the shoulder. Putting in the infraspinatus, teres major, minor, the deltoid, and then building the trapezius over the top of that. Now, if you're not familiar with anatomy, you might not see those shapes right away. This is the stage where I'm going to separate one from the other, putting cross contour lines over the top of those muscles. That helps delineate each space as its own, and it helps me understand the extrusion of the volume that's coming off of the body in those particular spaces. So I have two different lines here, the lines that separate out the muscles, and then lines that sit over the top of those muscles to help me see the cross contour or the overall volume of the pose. These last few types of quick sketch styles are done with a longer time duration. This one here was done in 20 minutes. This one is very similar to the previous quick sketch in that I'm looking for anatomy, But in this case, I'm rendering anatomy, so I'm working on a very deliberate chart, taking a little more time to plot all the edges, and then I'll go to work shading. And it's basically to learn the surfaces now, not just the division of space. So each tone that I apply to the surface isn't just a scrawl or a scribble of value. It's a very deliberate volume. So the width of this core shadow, for example, I'm paying attention to how it pinches down, how it jumps over a little bit, and I'm taking note of that. All the little spaces to help render up the form for me to be able to see it. And in doing this, it helps me understand surface topography and not just the division of space, which the other anatomy studies do. Those other anatomy studies are finding the volumes. This is truly finding them through the surface. And like I said, this is a 20-minute quick sketch, so there's a little more time involved here, which allows me to do a little more rendering with clarity. This next type of quick sketch is searching for likeness. And with that, I'm spending a little more time on the drawing. This is another 20-minute drawing. And I'm giving myself enough time to search for everything that I need to. Doesn't mean to say that you can't get a likeness in a shorter duration of time. You can. In fact, you can get a likeness in 30-second drawings if you're really on top of it that day with your pencil or with the tools that you're working with, as well as the information you're searching for. Everything just seems to connect. 30 seconds can be all the time you need to get a likeness. In this case, though, I'm spending a little more time looking for the likeness. I'm not drawing the picture really large. I'm keeping it down in a certain size so that within the 20 minutes I feel like I can get all the information I need. Every quick sketch should be like that. The time you give yourself is the amount of time that you're going to put all the information in to either capture the entire pose or action, or to capture all the features of the likeness and not just a few of them. It doesn't make any sense to do partial studies when you're really trying to develop a sense of clarity within the entire object. So with this, his skin is darker, and I have more values I'm going to be working with. So as soon as I start working out in the lights, I continue to darken the darks, and that pushes the value range broader across from each other to give me more room for more values within the light side. On the shadowy side, I'm not really going to render it out or describe it with too much detail because I'll be exhausting values I need for the light side. But this is again for a likeness, and once the likeness is achieved, I can move on to the next drawing. In this case, I don't need to go to the rest of the body. I'm just searching for the likeness in the portrait. This last type of quick sketching is known as caricaturing. And with caricaturing, you're just taking the shapes that are presented to you and you're using them in a slightly different fashion, organizing them in a way where you exploit what they have in characteristic, you push that, and you make that more apparent or more visible than all the other traits. In this case, we have a heroic type holding an axe, and what I'm doing is I'm taking all of the muscles that are on the body and I'm pushing them much, much further than they are on his body. He is well developed, but I'm making this guy into something of a rather large guy, and the model that I have, I don't necessarily think of him as a really large person. And I need a certain character type, so I'm taking him and I'm changing him a little bit to hopefully find my character I'm looking for. In this case, I'm thinning the bones and I'm broadening the muscles, and in doing that, it's pushing things a little bit and giving him a certain stature, and that's basically all I'm looking for here. I'm also taking his head or portrait and I'm completely changing that around too. And there's nothing wrong with doing that. That's in fact what character search is all about. And I'm not playing up the anatomy too much because if I do, then it gets really descriptive and it no longer has that animated feel to it. So I'm keeping things down to a minimum, but I'm looking for the most effective shapes possible to push my character.